あれ、なんか映ってるところをちょっと。あ、誰か見てるかな。こんにちは。誰か見てないか。誰も来てない。ライブ配信始めました。あ、誰か来てくれた。あ、こんにちは。私映ってるかな。ちょっとこんにちは。参加ありがとうございます。こうすればいいのか。こんにちは。写真部です。今集まって、今からお食事をします。誰か一人来てくれた。ありがとうございます。初めてのライブ配信をしています。何かチャットがあるので、よかったら書き込みをお願いします。チャット OK です。誰か来てくれた。ちょっと宣伝した方がいいかな。一人が視聴中になって始まりました。これで録画ができるかどうかがわかんないんだよね。参加してくれてる。参加してくれてる。あ、2人になった。ありがとうございます。あ、1人になった。これなかなか宣伝が難しい。いや、何もやってなくてもいいんだよ、別に。何かすごいことをやらなくてもいい。リマインダーオンとか言って、これでやんなかった。あ、見てくれてる。誰か見てくれてる。録画がね、できない。ね、録画ができないのが困ってる。録画を少しした方がいいかな。 した。ライブ配信できてる。なんか一人見てくれてる。
本当ですか？
なんか一人見てくれてる。
設定大変だったんですか？
いや、なんか予告通りにはいかなかったけど、とりあえずできた。予告からなんか予告編から自動的にはできなかった。何を？ああ。24000円の方。はい。あ、2人見てくれてる。ありがとうございます。これがね、録画ができれば一番いいけど、あんちゃんの人がない。こっちから見た方がいいのか。あんたもファイルやんか。今から見る映画はこれです。パエリア。結構美味しかったよね。あ、してた。すみません。ありがとう。すみません。こっちもパエリアにしたい。はい。お金を。ほら。いくら？1400円と900円ぐらいやったから。900円だったっけ？何してる？いや、あ、ダメ。2300円。2300円。いいですよね。はい。これは、おとといイベントに行ったときに出店されてたお菓子屋さんで。すいません。はい、どうぞ。
これ、台買ったの？
はい。
買った？
高そうだよね。
15000円。
そんなに？
はい。 すごい丈夫で、なんか小回りがついてる。
将来感じゃない。
これは今日何回じゃない。なんか作業するとき立って作るので、なんかちょうどいい高さにできるのがいいなと思って。ありがとうございます。これもライブ配信されてる。
上だけ、上の YouTube だけ、下は。
はい。YouTube が今配信されてる。
そうそう、配信されてる。
このお店どこにあるんですか？
駅前の
駅
通り。
昔、焼き鳥屋さんとかいろいろあったところで、昔のホスビルの前。
ホスビルの前の通りです。はい。
もっちゃん、この家具の移動って一人でやってる？
はい。
結構重いやろ？
なんか力あるねって言われた。もう一つのテーブルも昨日外に。皆さんも動かしましたよね。
でもね、私はね、下にカゴスベルっていうな、カゴを動かす器具をつけてるんよ。
はい。
だから軽く動くわけ。
見ながらしますか？どうしますか？見ながらします。立ててからします。
見ながらしようか。
はい。今回私もまだ見てなくて。
でもこんなことでもないとか、なかなかこれ見ないよね。藤井さんが持ってたのがすごい不思議なくらいで。
なんかレンタルもなさそうだ。
ネットで見たらほら面白かったとか結構出てくるけど、
嬉しい。
あ、2人見てくれてる。ありがとうございます。映画始まります。
この緑。
ありがとうございます。
Paradoxical. Fold. Yeah.
Mysterious.
Eccentric.
Eccentric.
Private. She was a very, very private woman.
I never had any idea she took pictures.
She would take photographs, many, many photographs.
She would never let this happen.
Is there anything that you wish was done differently then?
Sure, I wish I would have found those negatives instead of you.
It was winter 2007. The auction house is across the street from my home. I found this box that was loaded with negatives. I was writing a history book and I needed a lot of historic photos. And so I would take the negatives and I'd look up into the light and I looked for images of Chicago. There were several boxes that went with the set. I just went for the biggest one. 39 I won it for, I think it was $380. The auction house told me the photographer, her name was Vivian Meyer. Google searched her, nothing at all. I mean, absolutely nothing. So I just kind of gave up for a while. I looked at some of the stuff that night and it was cool, but nothing worked for the book, so I just put it in the closet. Just had to figure out, what am I going to do with this stuff? That's what sparked me to start scanning it. I have a reflex where we'll be driving somewhere and I'll just spot something from down the road that I know what it is and I know that it's valuable. I grew up doing the flea markets with my brother. My father did it. His father did it. I would do storage auctions, my brother, and he'd win some and we'd clean them out. We threw out tons of negatives because there's no value in negatives to most resale people. In these negatives that I discovered, when I saw it first, I didn't know if it was really good. I knew that I thought it was good. I contacted a couple galleries. I didn't know where to go. I made a photo blog and I put about 200 images up. I put a link on Flickr. That post, it just went insane. So I went on this mission to piece together the rest of her work. And then I found the other people who bought boxes, and I bought their boxes. And then I had all these negatives, like insane amounts of negatives. You always want to know who is behind the work. I just knew her name was Vivian Meyer. She's a journalist, professional photographer. Let me just Google her name again and see if there's anything up. I found an obituary that was placed just a few days before that search. I found an address in her stuff. And after some like white page searches, I called and I said, I have the work with negatives of Vivian Meyer. And he's like, oh, that was my nanny. That's his nanny. Why is a nanny taking all these photos? What they started to tell me about her was strange. They said she's kind of a loner, didn't have any family that we knew of. She never had any love life or children that we knew of. But she was like our mother. So it just caught my curiosity. So what I said was, do you have any of her stuff? And they said, well, I've been keeping up the bills on her storage lockers. We want to throw them all because I thought she was a packer. I said, no, don't throw it. He's like, you don't understand. She was a pack rat. We're going to get a dumpster. You're welcome to come and help us. If you see anything that you like that we're going to throw out, you can have. I just wanted to go find out who she was. Just a quick thing. I found this leather chest. It was like taped shut with just like box tape or something. And so we cut it and we opened it. It was filled to the top with rolls of undeveloped film. I took one canister and I shook it and it rattled. So I opened it and there was teeth inside. She had stuff wedged and hidden in everything that she had. Almost like it's like a secret little hiding spot for all of her little things. A coupon, a note, a flyer, bus passes, the train cards, her hats, shoes, her coats, her blouses. I have uncashed income tax checks from the government amounting to thousands of dollars. I have around 100,000 negatives. I have 700 rolls of undeveloped color film, 2,000 undeveloped rolls of black and white film. I realized everything needs to be organized and scanned and archived. But it was more than I can handle myself. So I thought, let's see what the museums will do. Tell me. Maybe I could get this into MoMA. Maybe I could get this in a tape mark. I sent them letters. And here is the reply. Dear Mr. Malouf, on behalf of the curators, I would like to thank you for thinking of the Department of Photography at MoMA. Unfortunately, the museum cannot accommodate these photographs at this time. At that point, I just figured I'm on my own. I'm going to try to do an exhibition. I'm going to do a book. It's an insane amount of work. I'm kind of compulsive with stuff. I just wanted people to see this incredible work. And I applied for a show at the Cultural Center in Chicago. They said this was the biggest turnout for any artist they had ever had. And then the story just took off.
The history of street photography is currently being rewritten.
Vivian Meyer. Saved from obscurity in death, she is getting the fame that she never had in life. John Maloof is still working his way through all Meyer's negatives. My mission is to put Vivian in the history books.
My first impression when I saw the work was the kind of delight when a surprise comes your way and you feel that somebody, hitherto undiscovered, suddenly makes their work available, and it looks good. It looks like there's an authentic eye and a real savvy about human nature and photography and the street, and that kind of thing doesn't happen that often. I see thousands of pictures day after day. People send me their websites to look at, and when I flip through them, I feel most of them are undistinguished. But Vivian's work instantly had those qualities of human understanding and warmth and playfulness. And I thought, this is a genuine shooter.
She had a great eye. She had a great sense of framing. What is she looking at here? I can't, this is the first one.
Bloody construction worker spot.
Oh my God. She had a sense of humor and a sense of tragedy. Beautiful. Her struggles for children are beautiful. Beautiful sense of light, environment. I mean, she had it all. Was she very prolific? Did she shoot a lot?
Total, there's about 150,000 negatives.
She shot a lot. She never started working with anybody.
That's what I'm trying to figure out so far, no.
I think people would have loved her work. I mean, I could even say Robert Frank with a square format. Lisette Modell. Helen Lovett, definitely. Diana Ross, some of the street portraits. Had she made herself known, she would have become a famous photographer. Something was wrong. Something, there's a piece of the puzzle missing. That's beautiful.
I really want to know, why did Vivian make these images? What drove her to such compulsion, to an obsessive degree, to take so many pictures? Why were they never shown? I started to unbox all of her stuff. I'm finding leads, receipts that she had. But her receipts are from the 70s and 80s. And in the 70s and 80s in Chicago, there was no area code. And I started calling these phone numbers, attaching every various area code. 773-312-708, 847-630-815. Yes.
I know Vivian Meyer because she was my childhood nanny for about 4 years, something like that.
Her job was as a housekeeper and a nanny.
Vivian was my nanny.
Vivian came into our lives when we needed a caretaker for my mother.
I was just staring at her and I had thought, where did my sister find this lady to babysit her kids?
She was obsessed with just saving bits of memories of moments in time. The stuff that she collected all helped me understand her a little better. I have dozens of audio tapes that Vivian made.
Since I put this ad in the newspaper, I've had a few calls. There were some idiots who called, who interviewed me, and they knew.
I have around 150 8mm and 16mm movies. found pictures of Phil Donahue, like in his home, petting a dog and at dinner.
I was a single parent in Winnetka, Illinois, with 4 sons. Along comes Vivian. I met her in a diner to interview her for this housekeeper job. She took my picture. I was a guy running back and forth over my shoes. I had to do a program every day, sometimes 2. I didn't want any trouble. I just wanted clean socks. She was with us less than a year. I have a memory of her taking a picture inside a garbage can. I thought, well, they laughed at Picasso. I didn't know. I mean, I didn't give it much thought. I didn't think she was crazy.
Vivian took self-portraits. In my mind, I don't know what image I had of this person, but it was definitely not the image that I uncovered.
She came across as unusual.
She wore big coats, felt hats.
The kind of thing that might have been popular in 1925.
She was always kind of hiding her figure, wearing these heavy clothes and these boots.
They used to call her army boots.
She was very tall, 7 feet. Oh, she was tall.
Oh, she must have been about 5'9".
6 foot.
She liked wearing men's shirts. I think
Men's
she
shirts?
said the tailoring was better.
She had kind of just a straight blunt cut.
She had hair that stuck straight up. Now looking back, I would say she kind of dressed like you would expect to find women factory workers in the Soviet Union in the 50s or something.
That's how she walked. You have to swing your arms up like this, and you have to do a sort of a Nazi march.
You'd see her on her little motorized bicycle. I mean, I remember sometimes thinking she kind of looked like a wicked witch of the West.
Always have her camera around her neck. Always the camera around her neck.
She had like this great camera. I remember it was a square Rolleiflex. You flip open the thing and you look through the viewfinder directly down.
I lusted after it went unrolling, and here she had one.
And I looked at that camera, and it looked like it was rather old.
You see, the Rolleiflex is a great disguise camera. Because it wasn't up here where she had to alert somebody on the street that she was photographed. She could be a little secret down here. The camera was shooting from below and gave her pictures a kind of towering magnitude. There's a picture of a guy, he's just an ordinary street guy, but he has a power and dignity. And he's standing there and he's looking at her. Look at his eye line. He's looking right into her face. And she probably looked down and focused and then looked right up at him. And he looked at her and she fired the shot. Street photographers tend to be gregarious in the sense that they can go out on the street and they're comfortable being among people. But they're also a funny mixture of solitaries at the same time as being gregarious. You observe and you embrace and you take in, but you stay back and you try to stay invisible.
She didn't like to talk about herself. Some people I meet, and they're very open. She was not an open person. She was a closed person.
She lived on the 3rd floor in our attic, and one of the first things she asked me for was please to put in a lock so that she could lock her area securely. It was a real serious lock.
She was mysterious. She said, don't ever open this door.
to her.
I think she made friends with me because she sized me up and thought I was strong enough to lift a bunch of boxes for her. I broke the springs of my car. I think that gives you an idea of how much weight I lifted.
She mentioned that she brought her life with her, which meant a number of boxes. We said, sure, no problem. We had a garage.
There's a porch off of the room, you know, such sort of those sleeping porches, and it was piled high with boxes.
We put them in our garage, which fortunately was a 2.5 car garage for 2 cars. And so we had this.
It became a 2-car garage.
Became a tight 2-car garage.
Now, of course, we'll never know how much the boxes were her photographs and how much the boxes were, well, but she had so many boxes.
I'd like to know why you would hoard all of this great art. Why would you share it? What's the point of taking it if no one sees it?
So sad, really, really sad. If you could have just shown her all the pictures and held her down in a chair somewhere so she couldn't put tape on her mouth so she couldn't tell you no. Obviously, the woman was so creative, it must have been galling to just, you know, be a maid. Wash the floors, making some lunch and dinner, taking care of kids as a nanny.
Some of the early photos I have are from 1951. One of them said on the back, the Walkers, Southampton.
I was surprised to see the photographs of my grandparents' house. We always called it Tides End.
It's amazing to see it so dilapidated.
This was flowers. We'd have lunches out here and tea, and it was wonderful. Vivian probably spent the summer. She was probably the nanny out of New York, tagging along with the family and the children. In those days, your father worked in New York and came out by train on Friday and went back on Sunday. I don't think that's changed very much. If you go to the beach club today and go down on the sand, you'll see the nannies there. Some of these women have been lucky enough to make their way up here to the United States. The girl who helps me, this is her 5th or 6th year here.
What's her name?
Olivia. Delightful, delightful person. I love her dearly. She speaks very little English and I speak very little Spanish. We get along beautifully.
It's been written about that she had few friends. I consider myself one of those friends. I liked her a lot. She was a terrific person. 1962. I lived in Highland Park, I had a lot of small children, I was home a lot. One of my children was friendly with one of the boys she took care of. The children, they were always at each other's houses, and she would come by. We had good conversations with kids swirling around us all the time. I had a very freewheeling, open household. There weren't a lot of rules. Don't get killed in the street. She loved the children, and the children loved her. She was wonderful to the children. I think we probably loved them as much as she probably loved everybody.
Who's that? Not you.
Well, gentlemen.
I think she was quite lively and wonderful person in her younger years. I mean, she must have been doing right. I can see how they worshipped her because she was doing the adventures that normally a parent would probably not do. Life was more adventurous with her around.
She was very opinionated about how children should spend their time, and mainly how they should spend it was out and about with her. She would load up the stroller with the baby and her bag and both kids, and off they would go on outings, and they had their routine. There was a Marshall Fields in downtown Evanston, and it had a candy counter on the first floor. Well, that was always the first stop because there were always free samples.
She would avail herself very heartily of the free samples. Meaning, like, she dumped the whole tray of Frango mints into her purse and walk away. We stopped going there all of a sudden when I believe that she was kicked out of Marshall Fields permanently.
A really clear memory is her setting up to take photos of all these naked mannequins. Some of them were headless, some of them were toppled over a little bit. But it'll be probably an amazing photograph. But as a child, it was taking forever. Standing there on the corner of the street, waiting while this weird lady takes pictures of these naked headless mannequins.
Then they would go out and they would look in the alleys for junk because that was what she liked to do. She would come home with pieces of metal, old furniture, and we would look at it. Is this art? Is this not art? What is this? Oh, this could be useful. This could come in handy sometime.
My brother Robbie, he was riding his bike home from school and he got hit by a car.
He was sort of laying in the middle of the street and an ambulance was coming and he says, and I don't know if this is true, but he always said that Vivian was taking pictures of him laying on the ground.
It wasn't like, Robbie, you okay? Or it was more just, oh, this is a good photo op. My mother drove up and saw my brother lying in the street. She said, oh, I thought the dogs got hit. Vivian was just kind of above the fray, and I remember thinking, there's Vivian taking pictures as usual.
She was aware of what was going on in politics and society at the time. She would bring this cassette recorder, and she goes to the supermarket, and she's asking people in line.
Hi, Carl. I got you with my machine. I was wondering if you had anything to say about all this political scene.
Well,
Nixon and so on.
I think that needs to happen to make sure for the best of the country.
And that maybe it will be a warning for future politicians.
That's right.
But what did you think of the impeachment? Well, come on. Yes, you are. Come on.
I don't know.
Well, you should have an opinion. Women are supposed to be opinionated, I hope. Come on.
There's one movie that she made that has a note in it. And it says, 1972 Chicago murder of mother and baby. Market where she found ad for babysitting job, which had led to disappearance and death. Then you see her walking to the supermarket. She's walking in the babysitter's footsteps. You see her walking to the neighborhood. You know, I just wonder if that's where the crime happened. She goes to the funeral home. She's kind of a journalist of the era. Usually you do that to show people, you know, to show this is what happened. She just did it.
One day in 1977, I was driving on Sheridan Road, and someone had flagged me for hitchhiking. Plenty of people do that. Turned out to be Vivian Meyer.
When I met Vivian back in 1972, I was in grad school at Northwestern, and I worked in the language lab. And it was not at all unusual for eccentric people to be coming through the lab.
She was French. She had lost most of her accent, I would say.
She affected what at the time struck me instantly as a fake French accent.
Some people have said she had a fake accent. But this is not true.
My degree is in linguistics. I have a PhD in linguistics. The truth is, it was a fake accent.
I happened to see the film, The Hospital of the Apocalypse, and probably not pronouncing it right.
It's the lilting sound of it, you know. I don't really know what you want me to do, but you have to do it. Come over later on, done that, everything will be okay.
Her voice, it seemed like it went up and down, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Her vowels were longer in duration than French vowels. I mean, you know, I did my master's thesis was on vowel duration in French, so I had a little bit of background in it.
I believe it's someone who had polished their English accent, having then lost some of the French accent.
Well, you don't want to see a copy of my dissertation, so no, you don't really. I asked her name. She kind of paused. I remember that, and she said, "Call me Smith." I mean, it was very clear she didn't want to tell me her name. I thought, this is weird.
She had been a customer of ours. She was a pain in the neck, to be truthful. We held things for her for as long as a year. We would say, "What's your name?" "I'm not going to tell you." "Well, we can't keep it without a name." "All right, Miss V. Smith." You know, ha ha ha, Miss V. Smith. It was painfully obvious that she was not Miss V. Smith. And we'd say, "Okay, phone number." "I don't have a phone." "Well, how are we going to get in touch with you if we need to?" "Well, you won't." Why was she giving us a fake name? We didn't think as much about it as you are.
Now she spelled her name differently. There's B as in boy, Meyer. Every possible combination of ways you can spell Meyer. M-E-Y-E-R, M-A-I-E-R, M-A-Y-E-R.
We always call her Miss Meyer. Miss Myers.
She said, "Call me Viv."
You would never have called this woman Viv.
Vivian. No, Vivian.
Why wouldn't you want to tell people your real name? I asked her what she did. And her answer was, another thing I'll never forget, "I'm sort of a spy." That's exactly what she said. I can still see her and hear her saying it was so odd. I think the only person who says that is somebody who's definitely not a spy. Why would you say that?
Now, what is your name anyway? We should know who we're speaking. "Oh, what's yours?" "Oh, my word, I'm the mystery woman."
Maybe she wanted to be somebody else. A lot of us do that.
If she did not have this job as the babysitter, her lifestyle would have been very understandable. The real question is, why did she do this kind of work?
Her intelligence and her views on things, there was something very precious to her about keeping them secret. Vivian may have looked down, so to speak, on the employers who were hiring her for this low-paying kind of work. She identified with the poor. I mean, she said she doesn't go to the doctor, she doesn't have any medical insurance, and I said, are you worried about that? And she said, The poor are too poor to die.
She told me that when she first came to New York, she went to work in a sewing sweatshop. She realized one day that she wanted to do something where she could be outside in the world, out and about, and see the sun, so she took up nannying.
She felt that it gave her a certain amount of freedom. Somebody else was providing the shelter for her. She wasn't having to work so hard just to make ends meet. So she had some free time for her photographic endeavors.
In 1959, Vivian told her employer, "I'm going to travel the world and I'll be back in 8 months." She went to Bangkok, India, Thailand, Egypt, Yemen, all of South America. She traveled by herself. Just her and her camera. There are thousands of photos from her world travels. Do you think Vivian would like the attention that she's getting?
I think she was very, I don't know, I don't think so. I think she was more of a very private person. I think she might have seen this as kind of an intrusion, you know.
I can't help but to feel a little uncomfortable or guilty exposing the work of a person who did not want to be exposed.
She was so secretive. I think that she would like her artwork to be honored, but I don't think she personally would like being in the limelight. I don't.
She would never let this happen. Had she known about it. No, she never would let it. That was her babies. She wouldn't have put her babies on display.
But I don't think she took all those photographs for them to just dissolve into dust. I think she took those photographs to be seen.
I find the mystery of it more interesting than her work itself. I'd love to know more about this person. And I don't think you can do that through her work.
So she didn't tell you anything about where she came from, her background. You didn't know anything, nobody pried into that?
No, not really.
Did you know anything about Vivian, family in the past?
No. It's amazing, isn't it, that you're friendly with someone for like 10 years and that you don't know anything more about him than this much.
We always thought she was French. Now she's kind of, Austrian? I mean, she's from Alsace, Lorraine or something.
She's from New York.
From New York? What do you mean from New York?
She was born in New York.
She was?
She was born in New York.
No, really? Oh, I thought she was born in Europe. I thought she was French. How did she acquire that accent?
So, where's Vivian from?
She's from New York City, born February 1st of 1926. Speaking from a professional standpoint, compared to what I've done in the past, this is ranked up real high on the list of difficulty. The families usually have some consistency as to where they're located. I at least have them in public record where I can find information about them. Not like this one. The whole family is a mystery family. There's a few things that we know about Vivian Maier. One, we know that she was never married. She was a spinster. She had no husband. She had no children. Her parents are both dead. Vivian did have a brother, an older brother. Clearly, he's probably dead. All of them seem to be private. All of them seem to want nothing to do with the rest of their families. All of them seem to be disconnected from the remainder of their family. She had one aunt who used to leave everything to a friend in her will. Not to family, but to a friend. And this is the reason why. She says here, and I'm quoting directly from her will, "I make no provision for any of my relatives for reasons best known to me, which I have disclosed to a few of my intimate friends." At the time of Alma's death in 1965, Vivian was obviously alive. Her only niece, whatever her hang-up was, it went to the grave with her.
Vivian's father was out of the picture very early on. So the census records show that Vivian's living with her mother. But I did know that she lived in France for a while, and that her mother was from France. So my guess was that there was family in France. Because the thing is, the 1949 photos and the 1959 photos are the same village. So I know she was returning to the same place. So I started looking up all the stuff that she had from France. I started looking at the photographs of France, looking at the little towns and the church steeples and how this church steeple looks and how that church steeple looks in this little village. And I would go on the internet and I would look up little villages of France and try to match the steeples. It's like matching a fingerprint. I knew I had at least one of the villages that she was in found. St. Julien and St. Bonnet in this remote little sheep herder village in the French Alps. Population 250.
She might have been offended that you found a little town. That was none of your business. She might say, "God, oh God, why did he do that?"
For some reason, my curiosity is overwhelming to find out more about Vivian. I'm uncovering an artist. If I'm leaving this giant boulder unturned because I don't go here, it would be a mistake.
Quand on parle avec les gens qui ont un souvenir d'elle, et ils en ont parce qu'elle était complètement différente. Dans les années 50, on ne prenait des photos qu'au moment de la communion, qu'au moment du mariage. Viviane Mayer parcourait les routes du Chamsora, qui s'extasiait sur une montagne, qui s'extasiait sur quelqu'un qui travaillait. C'était vraiment quelque chose qui était un peu bizarre.
Quel est votre lien de famille avec la famille de Vivian?
Et moi, je suis le dernier séculaire.
Alors Sylvain, vous avez des photos à nous montrer?
Mais oui, j'ai des photos à vous montrer. Mon grand-père. Nos arrière-grands-pères étaient frères.
Vivian did this.
Oh, ouais.
Yes, 100%.
C'est une photo faite
I have the same print.
Il a
This is her print.
And that's all. Ça n'est pas plaisir.
He says, aren't you happy?
Oh, her box camera. I have a similar.
J'ai l'appareil de sa maman.
No, that's her mom's camera.
Vivian's mom?
La maman de Vivian.
Oui.
Oh, c'est Sylvain. Et ça, c'est Vivian.
Yes, Vivian?
Yeah.
Vivian stuff was this letter. French. It is talking about the photography lab in France.
Oui, vous les avez pas, c'est bien.
Ça, c'est la lettre.
C'est mon fils Valérie.
You can do this.
Ah oui, ouais.
The letter starts out, "Dear Mr. Simon."
C'est mon père, alors, oui.
Soudain, je regarde les deux chefs-d'œuvre du chanteur. Ça me donne beaucoup de plaisir de recevoir. De voir ces paysages et cette occupation. Voici mon problème. Je me demande si nous ne pouvons pas faire des affaires en interaction. J'aime pas toujours le travail comme le vôtre. Je suis aussi difficile à connaître de les sans doute. Alors j'ai eu l'idée que peut-être je peux. J'ai des pieds de clichés. J'ai pris avec moi le matériel complexe. J'ai fait beaucoup d'expériences aux États-Unis. Et si je dois le dire, on est les enfants là-bas. Mais je dis que je le dis avec un au fond, je ne veux pas de glaçage car je préfère l'effet de glacé. C'est le même en papier que vous avez usé pour vos affaires postales. Enfin, de toute façon, laissez-moi savoir ce que vous pensez de mon ami et mon début.
Previously, we thought Vivian had no intentions of having anybody else print her work or show her work. This letter proves that assumption wrong. Vivian knew she was a good photographer, and she knew that these photographs were good. She wanted to show them to me. She may not have had that happen while she was alive, but we're doing it now. I stopped scanning myself because I just couldn't keep up with it. There's a lab in New York with technicians scanning her work Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, at a rate of about a few thousand a week. I've been developing the black and white film, so I have about a couple hundred left to develop. It's a very complicated and tricky procedure because you have to get the formula correct, and there's only one chance to get it right. It's magical. You don't know what she would have printed, what she would have chosen or edited. We're seeing work now for the first time that Vivian never saw herself.
When you contacted me, I wasn't sure if I wanted to get involved in a project with posthumous prints. I just didn't think it would be the right fit for the gallery. This is where we store our photographs. I think there are about 25,000 to 30,000 photographs in here. I mean, it's more than most museums have. Vivian Maya has had more interest in this work than perhaps any other photographer I've ever worked with.
It's a big problem trying to get her work into institutions. The problem is that the art world establishment still won't recognize Vivian's work. Museums usually deal with the final product, the print. It was made by the artist in the artist's life. They don't want to interpret an artist's work from where they left off. That's bogus because Gary Winogrand had a desk full of rolls of film that he never developed. So they're developing them. Eugene Etche's work was printed after his death and then ended up being acquired by MoMA. I mean, it's frustrating because it's being done but nobody wants to do it for Vivian's work. She did print some of her work, but it was largely not the best edit of her work. She was a masterful photographer, but printing was not her thing. It's common though. I mean, Cartier-Bresson hated printing, and Robert Frank wasn't a good printer, but they hire printers. They hire somebody to print for them. Good work is good work, and it's recognized that this is really great art. I do think her work needs to be appreciated by the world. These are new prints. Cool. Yeah, these are great. Thank you for showing me.
Very good.
The only way this work can move forward is if there's money that is made. The sale of prints will be a part of that. Of course, I wish that I could give her money. You know, she's gone. I mean, there's nothing I can do.
She always had a money problem. God knows she probably could have used the money. It's too bad she wasn't discovered 10 years earlier.
Marble? Yeah, you can. Here's the picture of Miss Myers, right in the corner. And I wouldn't call her Vivian because, you know, she'd have your guts for garters if you called her that. Not Mrs., not Vivian. She was Miss Myers. She was my governess from when I was 5 years old up until I was about 11 years old. I've got it in my baby book, the exact date. It was like March of 67 until about 1974. Inger and I were best friends, and so I would spend a lot of time with Miss Meyer. She would take us down to the city and we would just walk. In the worst parts of town, she'd walk very quickly, and so I had my little legs had to fly to keep up with her. She would swing her arms like this. And then her stride was just massive. Inger used to just beg her to slow down, and she would just drag her alongside. Poor thing. She'd take pictures of everything. She would see a subject. It was something that would interest her. She'd open her camera. She'd focus it. These poor, people, and she would literally ask them to like pose for her. She didn't tend to pose people. She'd like, stand there, wait, it was just the way it was. Impoverished people, take a picture. Or somebody crying, it's just bam. They, like, oh my God, what is this woman doing? We would joke about how we wanted to hit her over the head with the camera because she embarrassed us so much. It was imposing and rude. They felt, I'm sure, that they were being mocked in some way. I'm surprised she didn't get shot. My mom put her foot down and wouldn't let Miss Meyer take me into the slum areas.
She loved to read the paper. She liked it that we took the New York Times and she read it every day. And she always had an eye for the bizarre, the grotesque, the incongruous. She wasn't interested in sweetness and light. She liked headlines that revealed the folly of individuals. Stories that would enable her to basically say, I told you so. I told you so. Some man murders his wife and then gets caught in cold blood. I told you so. I mean, these things that reveal the folly of humanity. If you look at her art, she sees the bizarreness of life, the incongruity of life, and the unappealingness of human beings.
There were little things all the time that she was just playing in microscopic ways, just chipping at me all the time. I would go down with my allowance money to the craft store and buy myself 1,000 little tiny, like rainbows, glass tchotchkes. Viv would look at my trove of tchotchkes and hate it. She would get a big mop bucket and she would fill it with hot soapy water, yes, and ammonia. And she would have the ammonia be such a strength that you couldn't be near the bucket. Clearly, to need that much ammonia, you would surely be cleaning something very, very dirty. She would take her arm and and just swipe all the tchotchkes in the bucket, and they're crashing and grinding together and smashing, and then they're all covered in ammonia. Me, I sort of just quietly tolerated whatever was happening to me in my life. My brother acted out, and I don't think that she had good ways of coping with his behavior. She sort of ditched us. We were all taking a walk together down an alley. It just disappeared. The police finally found us. I think she wanted to scare us. And I remember getting lectured by the policeman. You can't leave your babysitter. And me saying, no. My babysitter left me. There were some accidents, which I knew were accidents that everybody knew were really accidents. Where all of a sudden there's a kid screaming in the basement with the door shut and the lights off. Yeah. That kind of thing.
She was mean. I don't know how else to say it. I don't know, she had like a dark side. I remember one time she said, these men, they'll have you sit on their laps, and then you'll feel something poking you. And I can't remember the context of what she said that, but it just was, she had this like anger in her towards men. And now I know exactly what she was talking about. But as a kid, I knew what she was saying was dark and a little not right.
I've seen her more than once jump back in fear, from a man. You said it several times over several years. Men, all they were out to was ruin you, stay away from them, be careful of them, that all they want is sex.
She was always afraid of being touched.
I remember she was standing up at the stump taking a picture of some sort of incident. The man apparently thought she was falling. He reached up and all she saw was a man reaching for her, and she decked him. She thought he was attacking her. It gave him a concussion.
Sent him to the hospital. I would bet money that she was brutalized in some way, attacked in some way, or, molested, whatever. I hate to say that, but something happened to her that was awful because nobody would act the way she did.
I remember some of the more strong emotional things, I'm afraid. It's harder to remember some of the other. I don't know if you want to go into this, but I will. There were things that happened to me that were not good. Smire was forcing me to eat because I wasn't finishing it on my plate. My parents found out, and my dad got angry. My dad found out exactly how it was. She would hold me down. She would shove the food in my throat, and then she would choke me until I would swallow it. She would do it over and over again. There was very much of a dark side to her that I have not gone into. She would lose it sometimes. The first time she hit me was when I was 5 years old, because I was trying to learn to tie my shoelaces, and I wasn't doing it right. She got very frustrated with me, so she started slamming my head into the side of this bookcase. I mean, she wouldn't hit me in the face. Obviously, I didn't have bruises there, but she'd grab me by the wrists and swing me around the room and slam me into things when she got really upset about something. And I was 8 years old before I could read the book. After that, she didn't do that again. I was strong enough. I mean, she's a brilliant person, and I think she really cared, and I think she tried. And I don't know if any of the others will ever talk about that, if it ever happened to them. I don't know. Maybe she got it together. I'm hoping she did.
I really hate saying these things about her because I've always felt guilty about not keeping it for longer. My husband and I were talking then about having a foster child. Bill said, if you want to take care of somebody, why don't you take care of me? And then she kind of laughed, but she meant it. I think she really wanted to be brought in to be a member of our family, but that wasn't really what I had bargained for.
So there it is. Then this little house, Ms. Myers lived upstairs.
My father did provide room for her above his office. I only got a chance to see it once. Back when I snuck up behind her because she kept a padlock on it.
So yeah, this is totally different. This was the forbidden zone. No one was allowed to see where Ms. Myers lived.
Miss Meyer went in there and she left the door open enough for me to see. And the room was literally filled with fluorescent newspapers. I told my dad, I said, oh, that's why the floor is sagging so much. He ended up having to put a steel, post in his office because the floor was sagging. He didn't know why. It was really full.
This floor was Viv's domain. It occurred to me that maybe I would need to go up there when she wasn't home, so she grudgingly gave me a key. And so I went in. You could tell where she had been walking, and it was just this narrow path that you could just barely traverse like this. And where would the bed have been? Right here. Stacks of newspapers almost to the ceiling. You may think I'm exaggerating. No, I am not. Just stacked everywhere. High, high stacks of paper. How she even could get to the paper. I don't even know how much she even looked at the paper. I began to see that she was stacking newspaper elsewhere in the house, in the basement, and in the back. We have a little back entryway, and she would stack newspaper out there. Now, the idea was always that there were articles she wanted to save for the day when she did get around to cutting out the parts that she wanted to keep. It concerned me, but I thought, whatever.
I gave her a ride to her place of employment. I looked at her desk and piles of stuff there. She was certain that her employers were coming into the room she had and going through her items. She would rig the books and so forth on her desk so that if they were moved half an inch, she would know that when she got back, or so that was Vivian's story. And she was also certain that people were looking through binoculars and could see through the window of her room.
She was progressively getting more and more reclusive, more and more hoarder.
Everybody was saying resoundingly, oh my God, you've got to get rid of your nanny. I don't think that Mom and Dad really realized the extent to which she was living with mental illness, because she was. Yeah, it was a little past eccentric.
My neighbor came over and said, I'm painting the back of a stack of newspaper. I said, sure. There was a huge stack right by the back door. I gave him a big chunk like this. I said, sure, go ahead. Well, when Viv came home, she saw that that stack of newspaper was shorter by 3 feet or 2 feet or whatever. And she was angry and horrified. Who took my papers? Who took my papers?
And she just went berserk. She went crazy. I remember an outside scene with screaming and yelling, where she's yelling at this guy, telling him to bring them back, but some already had paint on them and were ripped.
Now they're all covered with paint. Now I can't use those papers. They're covered with paint now. How can you give him my papers? So I just said, Viv, those aren't your papers. Those are my papers. And there are too many papers in this house.
I remember my parents telling me, Viv's not going to be with us anymore. She's gotten too crazy. Like, not that she wasn't already crazy, but that the craziness has increased to a level that we can't tolerate anymore.
I remember so clearly having to say to her, Viv, I think you're going to have to look for another job. How hard it was to say that to her. But you know what? I don't think she was even surprised. She looked back at me and she said, do you? She said, do you? She said, well, then what I want is 2 months notice and 2 months pay or something like that. She gave me her sort of what she wanted as if she had it on the tip of her tongue and she figured it out. And I didn't know whether that was because she had been dismissed from positions often enough that she knew what to say, or whether she had, in a way, anticipated it. My husband and I and our children, after she was gone, do you know, we just jumped in the car and drove up to Michigan, which is something we never used to do, just because it was a huge emotional thing not to have her. And you see, I'm still weeping about it because I really cared about Viv. And I think she cared about us. And it was just one of those things where she was a person who didn't fit in very well. She just had those edges that couldn't, and I think I flatter myself, I think we were one of the most sympathetic, accepting, and congenial families that she worked with. I don't know that, I think it may be true, and we couldn't make it work.
In 1996, we were getting my mother's house ready for sale. And when I told Vivian, I said, you can stay here for a couple of months. I won't put it on the market yet. You know, we have to get things ready and, you know, I'm not kicking you out. You can stay. Vivian was to be there, you know, to show it, but she was not at all helpful with the real estate people. She just didn't want to let them in. They were calling me saying she won't let them show the house. You know, you've got to do something, Judy. So I would call her and say, Vivian, you know, you have to let people see the house. They did manage to get in and they did manage to sell. I think we closed the last day of the year. The lawyer called and said, Judy, we're just afraid she's not going to be out. And I said, she'll be out, don't worry. She will be out.
The last time I saw her, still unhappy about it. Must have been probably 2000. I was in Wilmette, going to the beach with my daughter, her children, and 4 other children of her friends.
It was a hot summer day, like August, like 100-degree day, and all of a sudden I see this woman walking down the street. Immediately, like, there's Vivian.
I hadn't seen her in 30 years, but we recognized each other at once. And we both, oh, hi, how are you, Vivian? And how are you, Carol? And it's been so long.
We're like, well, it's great, you know, to see you. And we said, we have to get going. And she was like, please don't leave. You know, she's like, Carol, you know, my mother's name. She's like, Carol, please don't leave. You know, when you're with a bunch of kids and they're swirling around you and they want to go to the beach and it's a hot summer day, you know, you're like stuck. And she kept saying, talk to me, let's talk. And I kept saying, I can't do it, Vivian, I have to go. And I have to go. She kept saying, but you're my friend. And I dropped the ball. That's all I can say. I feel badly about it.
the despair in her voice about seeing a friend, and I feel that I let her down. So I proceeded to go to the beach with the kids. I said follow us, but she didn't want to do that, so that was the end of that.
I do remember once, she wouldn't tell me where we were going. I don't want to tell you, it's a surprise. She took me to the stockyards. It didn't come into my consciousness that, well, this is where they go to kill the animals. There was a trailer full of sheep. I do remember guys poking at them with sticks to get them up down this long ramp. After they were done offloading the sheep, they started throwing out dead sheep when they got trampled. That was the first time I ever saw death. Looking back and thinking about it, it didn't bother me. It was just kind of odd, I couldn't understand it. I've always been a critter person, and these are my guys, the sheep.
The end of her life was something that I worried about when she worked for me. I thought, how can this end for her? I don't think it had a happy ending. I was very glad that these men that she took care of when they were little kids kind of came to her rescue.
They got her an apartment and paid for her rent.
Do you live in the area? Do you remember a woman who used to sit on his bench a lot wearing a big floppy hat?
She's a French lady. Yeah, I remember her. People who still live around here, yeah, we remember her. She was here a lot, sitting on the bench. But I don't think anybody really talked to her. There's a lot of eccentric people on here, and I just thought she was one of them. You need to just leave her alone. Sometimes she'd be at the dumpsters. You'd ask her, you know, do you need help or what, do you need food? And she'd just kind of yell at you in French.
How'd you know her?
Just from seeing her in the neighborhood.
And you would sit with her on
Well, I always sit on the bench and she'd sit there, and finally it took weeks or months before she'd even speak to me.
I would see her in the alley all the time going through the garbage. I had a bunch of old clothes and a little hat one time I gave her and she took it. She said, oh, that's great, I'll wear that when I sleep.
So she was very short of people. It was funny though. Nice lady.
When I was riding my bike, sometimes I'd cross her path and she'd yell to me, get a bell, get a bell. And sometimes I'd be out in the alley in the winter and she'd see me without a hat and she'd yell, get a hat, get a hat.
She was about this bell on her life.
Who would have known that she was actually a great artist and she come to dumpster diving?
That's the sad.
And I mean, sitting on the park bench there, she'd go across the street, she'd get a can of food. That one she had one day was like corned beef hash or something, and right out of the can, not even warming up, it was cool. And so it was delicious.
She was much more damaged than I thought. And I have a lot more empathy for her. I just think, what a lonely lady. Incredibly lonely. And, misunderstood. So, yeah, I think, I mean, now if I were to see her today, after this, I wouldn't be as hard on her.
Somebody called me and said the old lady in the park, she fell, she kind of passed out, and the ambulance was up there, so I went across the street, and at that point they were loading her into a little cart there, and she was telling the people, the paramedics and such, that she did not want to go, she wanted to go home. And they said that she has to go with, and she looked at me as if to say, can you do something? But there was nothing I could do about it. I asked the paramedics, they said, no, she has to go. But that was it. I mean, they put her in the ambulance and took her away. And after the fact, a lot of people in the neighborhood said whatever happened to the old lady, and nobody ever knew.
You have to try to draw from the evidence you have some understanding of the individual. I think her pictures show tenderness, instant alertness to human tragedies, and those moments of generosity and sweetness. I see her as an incredibly watchful, observant, caring person. And probably why she was a nanny was that she had those capacities.
1962, she took a lot of the pictures. The kids would always play in the ravines. It's the most beautiful spot in the world. Instead of this straight edge suburban community, you always went there because you wanted the kids to have a little touch of nature. Wild nature. Little patch of wild strawberries somewhere in there. And I think she liked it so much, that's why they buried her there. It's a place that they remembered she was happy.
Now you tell me how you can live forever. Come on.
She might have gotten to the end of her life and thought, why didn't I try to get that work out there? Some people's character prevents them from pushing that little bit you need to push to get the work seen. She didn't defend herself as an artist. She just did the work. A canon is often established. And so when someone comes in, there's always the sense that they're secondary figures. But I don't feel her as secondary. When I look at the pictures, I always feel something primary.
I think that the work is so good that it's really winning over a lot of people who were dismissive of it previously. We're going to wind up, who knows.
Much of the art world establishment still hasn't accepted Vivian Meyer's work. But people don't care. They're not waiting for that validation from institutions. They're claiming Vivian Meyer's work for themselves. Her work is now in galleries in New York. It can be seen in LA.
One particular that I bought, which I love, there's an abject poverty in the frame, but there's also a happiness in spite of it all.
Her work is being seen around the world. London, Germany, Denmark, they're embracing it, and they're embracing Vivian Meier.
T'es pas rasé? T'es pas rasé?
Ah, c'était moi. Bravo. C'est beau, hein? C'est beaucoup d'émotion. C'est ça, c'est sûr.
Maybe this is the best way of all for her, to have it happen after she's dead. That would probably make them the happiest. Because in her own life, the attention, I think she would have found overwhelming.
Viv was supposed to be downtrodden, right? She was like a nanny. That's not considered to be a pretty high-ranking position in life. Not married. Not any social life to speak of. She didn't have these measures of status that people aspire to, but she didn't have to compromise with it. She did what she wanted. That's what she taught me. Is that she got the life she wanted. She did.
I understand a lot more about her. But why was this person so private, yet so prolific in art form that she never shared? Who knows? She did it, so it wouldn't be forgotten. Here, it's not forgotten.
As she was photographing, she was seeing just how close you could come into somebody's space and make a picture of it. That tells me a lot about her. It tells me that she could look into a space with a total stranger and get them to accommodate her by being themselves and generate this kind of moment, where two presences were actually kind of vibrating together. And then she's gone.
Well, I suppose nothing is meant to last forever. We have to make room for other people. It's a wheel. You get on, you have to go to the end, and then somebody else takes their place. Now I'm going to close and quickly run next door to do my work.
ね、わかんない。もう全然時間の感覚がない。
だって見たけど家で今日見たの面白く感じた。返金だった。
ありがとうございました。最後まで見てくださって。映画は終わりました。一応まだこのままにしておきます。何分いけるかやってみます。1時間半ぐらい見てたのかな。1時間は見てたよね。1時間以上はね、見てたね。膨大な数やったんです。ないってことは多分全部プリントできてないってことよね。ですよね。
整理したよ。
すごい。
価値があるかどうかわからない。
取り出す。
あ
れをゴミ箱に入れればいいんじゃない？
DVD をゴミ箱に入れれば。
うん、そうそう。
ありがとうございます。
さんちゃんのそれ MacBook Air？
エアーです。
エアだから別になるんだ、それがね。
あ、そっか。プロはついてるんですね。
はい、中に、そのまま。
ここのリーダーがすごい古いので、なんかもう一回変換して差し込んでる。写真が入ってる。
なんか大女だったみたいに、ね、すごい背が高い。はい、何回か入ってるんだな、これ。1枚だけど。
持ってきてなかったっけ？本は写真集は。
写真
はビデオだけ。
ビデオだけだったよ。あ、うまっ。かわいい。
かわいい。
いやいや、いいよ、全然。もっと食べちゃおうかな。
ありがとうございます。私これが
でも当時ローライフレックスを持ってたっていうのは、多分今のお金で100万ぐらいしたはずなんで、結構そのカメラの買いだな。
本当ですね。
でもなんか、結局自分の好きなところに子供たちを連れてって写真
撮るついでに
写真撮るついでにやってたって感じよね。
フィルムってそんなに値段はしないですか？
コダックが昔はあったから、
はい。
日本で買うより安かった。今は結構高くなってる。
はい。
当時としては、庶民が買えるようになって。カメラローライフレックスを時代に持って撮ってた。あれ、カメラ自体が高かったので。言ってました。それが、なんで持ってたの
そろそろ終わりでいいかな。そろそろすいません。ありがとうございました。参加してくださってありがとうございました。あ、なんかいいねも押してくれてる。終了。
こっちは映ってないんですよね。
映画は映ってない。